This is the first in what's going to be a long series of videos talking about statistics. It's going to be based almost always out of the book Stats, Modeling the World by Bock, Velleman, and Veaux. This is a picture of the third edition, which is probably the most current because I'm just getting this off of the Pearson website. I'm actually going to be using the second edition, which I don't think is very different from the third edition. So in Chapter 2, which is the first substantial major chapter, it's about data. And I'm going to assume that you've taken a look at that chapter or have the equivalent background. And I'm going to do just exercise 1, which says pick a source of data and answer crucial questions, crucial basic data questions. Who, what, when, where, why, and how, and a couple of other questions. So by who, they mean what are the individual cases? And so that's a little more technical terminology. What are the individual cases that the data is about? Well, let's look at this picture. What we've got is a bunch of countries. Here's the different countries, and then we're measuring something about the country. So the who is going to be countries. And they're all around the world, but it's not every country in the world. It seems to be basically the major economies in the world. Some of them highly developed, like Japan, United States. Some of them, you could still say developing, but a major economy like India. Okay, so the cases are countries. So far, we'll see that there's actually a lot to this web page. What? Well, let's see. What are these numbers measuring? Ah, here it is. Look at the boldface. Overall debt and percentage of GDP. Latest. Okay, so that says a lot right there. What's being measured, as far as we can tell so far, is overall debt. Now, the type, the really crucial thing here, huge distinction in statistics, is this a quantitative or a categorical variable? Is it something where it's a number that we care about as a numerical quantity that we want to do arithmetic with, or comparison, bigger versus smaller? Do we really treat it as a quantitative number? Well, probably. A debt is something with money. That's something we could add or subtract, or we can compare bigger or smaller. We can do a lot of arithmetic stuff with it. We care about it as a quantitative variable. And another hint, which this book is good about reminding us, is that if we can't specify the units of something, then maybe even though it's a number, it really doesn't deserve to be called a quantitative variable. But here the units are clearly given. Percentage of GDP. So GDP stands for gross domestic product. So that would mean, like India here is just a little bit over 100% of GDP. That would mean the total indebtedness of India overall is a little bit more than everything they produce in a year, which is a little scary, but Japan's even scarier, over 5 times GDP. But Japan hasn't sunk into a black hole yet, so it's an interesting fact. Okay, so there's the units percentage of GDP. Okay, when? Well, that's this one word, latest. Okay, so recent data. It's not being extremely explicit about that, but hopefully in sometime in the last year, maybe, this has been measured. We'll get some more interesting information about when in a minute when we start clicking on stuff. Where? Well, worldwide. Except, sorry, Australia, you don't count. That's too bad. And Africa, interestingly, doesn't have any representatives in this particular worldwide, but maybe, let's just say maybe biased in terms of what economies are being picked here. It seems to be larger economies. Okay. Why? Well, we all care about the state and future of the world economy, perhaps. There's all kinds of reasons you could be interested in this. Why is one of the most vague and therefore most interesting questions in this set. But this is interesting to me because I'd like to know about, well, what countries seem to be doing better in terms of debt, which ones are doing worse. Okay, how? Well, it says source McKinsey. Okay, well, McKinsey, we could Google McKinsey. It's a consulting company, but no further details. They don't give us a lot of details here about exactly how they got this data. And that's something, if we were skeptical, we'd want to look at some more. Okay, so that answers a basic version of this. But look at this. Ooh, click highlighted countries for time series. Ooh, and we got some clicking stuff up here. So in fact, there's actually a number of variables that are measured here. There's government, they have a little glitch there. Government debt, Japan far outstrips everybody else in terms of that. Household debt, which is there's more kind of an even distribution. Lots of people have over 80% of GDP household debt. Financial debt, Britain is huge in that, and I'm not sure exactly what financial means there, but things like stocks and bonds, stuff like that. And then non-financial, it's not clear what that means compared to the other categories. So we might not understand all the terms here, but one thing that we've discovered is that there's various different bar charts. So in fact, the what is overall debt and government debt and household debt and two more, I'll just say, etc. So there are, for each each case, there are multiple variables that are being displayed in bar charts. Okay? Now, if we go back to the overall, there's something even more interesting. If you click on an individual case, you'd think it would just give us those numbers, but in fact it gives us what's called a time series. Oh, this is a lot more data. Okay? So in fact, we could go back and say, well, there's a refined version of the WHO. It's actually got data going from 1975, and it looks like maybe every month, because there seems to be many more points than just there are numbers here. Maybe every month or so, or every quarter perhaps, quarter of a year, they've got the data for the government debt, which is this part, the household debt, which is this part, the financial debt, and the non-financial corporate debt. So that makes it a little clearer. So this is companies owing stuff, but not in the financial sector maybe. And then wait, where did total go? The overall? Oh, the overall is the sum of all these. So this is a very common kind of chart where you have these layers and they stack up. So for example, where any particular layer is skinny, like this blue layer is very skinny, the difference between this height and this height, that is the financial debt in the late 80s. The difference between these two heights is the household debt. The total, it's a nice way to get the total, that's just the height of the top above the baseline. So this is really the graph of total overall debt, which was the thing we started with. Here's the government share, the household share, the financial and the non-financial corporate share. So I would say the WHO now is countries and quarter years. So you pick one country, like here I clicked on the US, American debt, and then I look at the 95, right above 95. I've got four numbers, in fact 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the sum of them is 5. So I've got a lot of data for that country in that quarter year. So in fact there's an immense amount of data here. You can go to Brazil, get the time series, Russia, get the time series. And then of course we have to change the when. So in fact it's the last few years. Now notice for Russia they only have it from 2000. Wouldn't make sense to go back to 75 when they were communist. It'd be almost impossible to get the data and they wouldn't be accurate. Notice that the data here is only yearly instead of quarterly. Okay, so last few years, and it depends on which country, and the resolution, the fineness of measuring in time also varies. Okay. And then probably the other questions can be the same. So there's a lot of stuff here that you can get out of a chart like this. So that's a good example of looking at the who, what, when, where, why, and how. All of it was quantitative data for this case. We could put in some qualitative data. For example, they didn't have it explicit, but it's you could get it. For each country, you could label what continent they're on, for example. United States and Canada, the categorical variable continent would be North America. For Brazil, it would be South America. So you can see that here's Europe. You can see that visually from the chart, even though it's not explicitly noted there. Okay, so we could put that in here. Could have a categorical variable, which would be the continent. That's not a quantitative variable because it's just an either or, because you can't add North America and Russia, for example, or you can't say North America is bigger in some meaningful sense here than Asia. We wouldn't care about that. And it really doesn't have units. It's just a label. So that would be an example of putting a categorical variable into this.